what is the connection between William Shakespeare and Nintendo? Well, let me tell you. William was born in a little town not far from Birmingham, England in 1564. Before he became famous, he was a struggling writer who maybe had to do a bit of deer poaching to survive. After a shotgun wedding, he ran off to London and wrote some plays and might have died from drinking and partying too much, but not before writing his play Othello. The main protagonist in Othello was a general who felt insecure because his skin was of a slightly darker color. His insecurities used against him, he was tricked into killing his own wife and himself. Tragic. But at least his name will forever be remembered because later a board game bearing his name would be invented. The game Othello is played on an 8x8 grid where players position black and white discs according to certain rules. The modern Othello game was patented in Japan in the 1970s. The black side symbolizes Black Othello, while the white symbolizes his wife Desmonda. The original game, however, was called Reversi and was invented in 1883 by two Englishmen at the same time. How can that be, you say? Well, they both claimed to have invented the game, but neither could prove it. So how do you think they settled the dispute? Not by pistol duel, because since the start of the 1800s, dueling had gone out of fashion. In the Victorian era, it was considered barbaric and uncivilized to have a duel. And also you could be charged with murder if your opponent died, as laws were beginning to be taken seriously. Ah, the Victorian era, so full of potential. That's when sciencing officially began, because that's when the term scientist was coined by William Ewell, who was himself a scientist. By the 1890s, 26,000 telephones were in service in Britain, life expectancy was around 50 years, and it finally started becoming fashionable to marry someone because you love them, and not just for practical reasons. On the other hand, if you think living in London is bad today, back then it was common for 8 people to sleep in a single room, while in the slums that number could go up to 30, and sewage was often running in the streets. Sounds like being on a ship would be a better life? Well, sure, you would be paid well and could send your earnings back home. You had healthcare, fresh food, shore leave, and even a pension if you served long enough. But also common were malaria, accidents, drowning, falling, bloodletting, flogging, and dealing with drunk sailors in crowded rooms. Small price to pay for seeing the world. The British Merchant Navy was trading contraband drugs to China, but more so spices and tea from India and the Far East. But how about exploration? That sounds like more fun. Sadly, the age of exploration has long since concluded by now. And even if it hadn't, there were always far more ships devoted to trading than to exploring. So your odds of ending up on an exploration ship would always be pretty low. While the British were quite enterprising in setting up trading colonies and ruling over foreign lands that have already been discovered, they were actually pretty late to the exploration game. They were the first to explore and map the coastlines of Australia, New Zealand, and parts of North America, but they weren't ahead of Spain and Portugal. In fact, when it comes to actually discovering new land, meaning being the first Europeans to actually see it, the British had pretty much nothing to their name. That's because the age of discovery was well underway, while William Shakespeare's great-grandfather was still alive, when England was investing money in other, more practical things. But thanks to a man with a dream who also loved boats, Prince Henry of Portugal, expeditions to explore the world had plenty of wind in their sails. Portugal led the way in the 1400s, slowly inching their way towards the southern tip of Africa and then back up towards India. In 1543, they were caught in a storm while heading to China and crashed into Japan, communicating by drawing in the sand. This was the first time the Japanese people had made contact with Europeans. Soon after, Japan was eager to buy all the cool European stuff from Portugal, like guns, but also playing cards. The card games they played were similar to today's bridge, where players timed their best cards to win rounds. 100 years later, and the isolationist government expelled all foreigners, and the games evolved into gambling. Soon, the designs linked to gambling were banned, so players would change the cards to keep gambling alive. A new design would lead to a new ban, which would lead to a new design. As the government tried playing whack-a-mole, with each new version the designs became weirder and weirder. Finally, the government tried banning all gambling cards of any kind, but the gamblers said screw you, we can gamble even with educational cards with poems on them, so try banning those. In the late 1800s, playing cards became tolerated again. That's when Fusajiro Yamauchi decided to found a new company dedicated to selling handcrafted playing cards. He named the company Nintendo. Today, you can play these cards, called Hanafuda, in clubhouse games on the Nintendo Switch. That's the end of the video. Like, subscribe, share, Patreon. Thank you for watching.